Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I have taken up another challenge. Last time, a bunch of you wanted me to try out the M39 EMR with absolutely no attachments, so I couldn't use any scope, an underbarrel, a barrel to try to improve this weapon, just its bare bones, and then just see if I can go on some kill streaks with it. And going into this challenge, I thought that it was gonna be kind of a nightmare. I thought that because the DMRs are one of the weaker classes in the game, and since I just do not like using them, on top of the fact that I wasn't able to use a scope or anything to improve the weapon, that this was going to be a very difficult challenge. And while I would say that it was, once I started to kind of get the hang of it, once I started to kind of change my mindset and how I approach combat, it wasn't as painful as I initially thought it was going to be. So the M39 EMR I know is a favorite amongst people that actually enjoy using these weapons, or at least that's kind of what I hear. I don't use them very often, but stats-wise, it's got some interesting characteristics. It's going to do 43 damage up close and then drop off to a minimum damage of 30 at long range, and it also only has a rounds per minute of 300. And while that's on the high end for the designated Marksman rifles, and that's a solid attribute of it, you still have to remember that 300 RPM is still very low when you compare it to pretty much any other weapon in the game, be it an assault rifle, a carbine, an SMG, or even a light machine gun. That is very, very slow. And so while it's very consistent, I mean, 43 damage up close is going to take you 3 bullets to drop your enemy, and then anything further than that is going to take you 4 bullets. So pretty much if you get 4 bullets into your enemy at any distance, you know that they're going to drop. Because you only have a rounds per minute of 300, you have to make sure that all of your shots are landing, especially if you are up close and personal. If you try to run a gun with a designated marksman rifle and you're able to do well, my hat is off to you, because that is not easy to do. And if you want to win those firefights, more often than not, you need to get at least 1 headshot if you are 10 meters away from your enemy. Because if they're using any type of weapon other than maybe another designated marksman rifle, the rounds per minute on those guns, as long as they kind of know what they're doing, they're going to be able to absolutely blow you out of the water simply because of the way that DMRs work right now. And then on top of that, the M39 also has a fair amount of initial recoil as well, and if you compare it to some of the assault rifles and some of the other class of weapons in the game, it has more than them. And so if you're trying to be consistent with each of your shots and you're trying to nail a target at a distance, you kind of have to be patient with each of your rounds. You have to kind of wait for the gun to settle. You can try to compensate for the recoil. I mean, I know that some people out there are able to master it, but for someone like me who just maybe hasn't put enough time into the weapon itself, it's not easy, and so I kind of just have to be very patient with each of my shots. And you guys will see throughout today's video is I kind of have a very consistent shot pattern. I'm not usually spamming unless I'm up close and personal and I have to take out the target immediately, but especially for those medium to long range targets, I had to be very patient with each of my shots, and that's just simply because of the way that the weapon performs and that initial recoil. One nice feature though, it's not all terrible by any means, is that it does have 21 rounds in its magazine. And so if you are able to be consistent with your shots and you're very accurate with the M39, you can go on some pretty impressive kill streaks without having to reload. You need to be very accurate, but you can do so, and if you're nailing headshots all over the place, you can have some pretty impressive kill streaks. As for its reload time, and the last stat we're going to be taking a look at, it's got a short reload of 2.25 seconds, which is actually pretty fast. I mean, you're not going to be going through the long reload time all that often because you do have so many rounds, but if you have gone through all of your ammunition, you've gone through your entire magazine, it's going to take you a staggering 3.4 seconds. So if you are using the M39, just make sure you have another bullet in the chamber so you're not having to wait another second, which in some scenarios can mean the difference between life and death. And so the way that I approached this challenge was I knew I needed to kind of change my mindset. I knew that if I tried to play very aggressively, or I tried to kind of run and gun and take people out by getting headshots, that while maybe every once in a while, if I came across some enemies that just did not know how to play Battlefield 4, or they did not know what was going on, then I could be somewhat successful, and it happened every so often. But I kind of drilled it into my brain that if I wanted to go on kill streaks and I wanted to be effective with the DMRs, I needed to play passively and I needed to lock down long corridors. And so what you guys hopefully have been seeing throughout today's video is that I'm not kind of pushing up onto objectives. I'm not kind of running around like a madman. I'm positioning myself in a location where I know there's going to be a lot of foot traffic. I know that there are going to be a lot of high priority targets that are going to be heading towards certain objectives. Since I was in such a prime location, taking advantage of my environment, I was able to just absolutely destroy the enemy team. And it was only after I had that mindset of being more passive and defensive and trying to play more of a lane control or zone control, that's when I finally started to have more success. And what was most surprising to me, the biggest surprise, is that I was reaching the top of the scoreboard consistently. That doesn't happen very often with these terrible weapon challenge series. Like normally I'll be at like the middle or sometimes even the bottom depending on what the challenge is, but maybe it's just because the M39 EMR isn't as bad as I first thought, or maybe I'm just getting used to these weapons in general and using them appropriately, but surprisingly I was reaching the top of the scoreboard consistently. Another thing that I had to work around is the iron sights, and while I would not say that they're the worst in the game by any means, there are definitely worse iron sights in Battlefield 4, they obstruct plenty of your view, and so if you try to spam your trigger finger, it makes it very hard to track your enemy. And so once again, I kind of going back to just being very patient with each of your shots. Not only did I have to deal with the recoil, but if I did try to spam the weapon itself, the iron sights would also get in the way, so it just kind of reinforced that type of mentality and that type of playstyle even more. So if this is all sounding very appealing to you and you'd actually like to use the M39 EMR appropriately and with some attachments, I do have some recommendations. The optics, of course, is always going to come down to personal preference, but because this is a marksman rifle and you're going to want to kind of use it at a distance, the higher optics or the medium scopes I would say is a good bet. So like the ACOG scope, the 3.4 are all solid recommendations. The accessory slot, or the second one, laser sight I guess is decent. These are not perfect for the DMRs simply because they don't really provide any long range benefit, and so I normally stick with the laser sight because it makes it a little bit better for some hip fire panic scenarios, but overall it's all really going to come down to personal preference. As for the barrel attachments though, this is where you get a couple more options. You can use the muzzle brake, which is solid because it is going to reduce your vertical recoil, which is fairly substantial for the M39, but personally I kind of like to use the suppressor. I like that stealthy assassin roll. I find it to be very satisfying, and while it is going to reduce your bullet velocity and make it a little bit more challenging for you to take out targets at a distance, if you kind of play the medium game and work around the map in such a way where you're going to be fighting medium range engagements, it can be a fun little attachment to use. You can also try out the heavy barrel, but honestly, because it does increase your recoil by 50%, I don't think it's a solid recommendation. It will make you a little bit more accurate, but I don't even think it's even that beneficial with the DMRs to begin with because they are single shot. So personally, I would kind of stay away from the heavy barrel. As for the underbarrel, this is absolutely no brainer. You're going to want to use the angle grip. This is going to reduce your first shot recoil by 33%. Because the first shot recoil is pretty much all you're going to be dealing with the EMR, you can't go wrong with that attachment. And so overall, while I definitely cannot say that this was the most difficult challenge that I've ever done, like I've done some pretty insane challenges, especially back in Battlefield 3, it was kind of an eye-opener for me, and it kind of gave me a better appreciation of how to use these weapons. And while I still believe that they do need a buff, I still think that all of the other weapons can outperform them in pretty much every single type of combat scenario, especially if you're using a long-range assault rifle. Like, I just think they blow the DMRs out of the water. But even still, if you are looking for a challenge or you're looking for some weapons that require a little bit more skill but are also fairly satisfying, if you can get past the learning curve, you can finally master these weapons and start to do well, you're in for a treat. Like, it is a lot of fun to use these weapons to lock down those long corridors and to just dominate the enemy team. But that is about it for today's terrible weapon challenge, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have a setup that you would like me to try next, let me know down below in the comment section, and also make sure to thumbs up the ones you would also like me to try. But until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.